for oil. It's very difficult to know where to start, and it's a very, very difficult subject to talk about without actually getting quite angry. Because the more you dig into this, the more appalling it gets. I have to say I didn't know an awful lot about our offshore oil and gas at the level I now know about it until about 6 months ago. I have been involved before in getting things changed. The strategy that we're adopting is that we're not engaging with the political establishment, we're just engaging with the public only, on the basis that the Irish political establishment leads from behind, and it will only change its position when the public changes its position. So we're currently engaged in putting together a book, which is basically a new strategy for oil and gas, harvesting, doing it properly, which will cover environmental issues, geological issues, economic issues, planning, reforming the planning area, and the list goes on. And we'll have a history section dealing with our real problem in standing up for ourselves and our self-esteem when it comes around our ownership of our natural resources, which goes back many decades. We have an input from a CPSE class to giving us the voice of youth and so on. And then we'll have an advocacy group ready to go with PowerPoint presentations and videos across grassroots organisations, universities and schools throughout the country. And then next year we hope to run a convention, and it's only then we'll engage with the political establishment, when we've absolutely scared the living shit out of them. Now you might say, can that be done? Well, in 2005 there was absolutely no chance that the groceries order was going to be reviewed until the department got thousands of nappies sent in the post by people throughout Ireland once they discovered that nappies were designated as an item protected by an arcane piece of anti-competitive law. And that was because of public exposure. The insurance industry in Ireland colluded with the banks and insurance companies to deny consumers' rights to transparency at point of sale until it was attacked under the Competition Act by just a study that was sent in to the Competition Authority, which I was involved in 1996, and 4 years later we had a U-turn and we had consumer rights brought in, despite the best attempts of government to prevent it from happening. Now, when we look at the Irish situation, a lot of you will be familiar with the potential enormous dividends we can get from our offshore oil and gas, but of course it has to be done properly with very, very high environmental standards and so on. The question is why aren't we doing it? And the reasons really are to do with incompetence. You don't have to look very far to see it. We had last year, for example, the Joint Oireachtas Committee published a report on offshore oil and gas. It had 9 submissions. One submission from outside of this country, which was from a civil servant who came in from Norway. We had 4 local small groups presenting. The Department of Energy itself, I just call them the Department of Energy, just keep it simple. The offshore oil and gas lobby presented, and SIP2, and basically that was it. And they decided the possible future direction on potentially 750 billion euros worth of offshore oil and gas assets. And this is terribly important, because the rents from these assets belong to us, the people. And the rents are the excess profits that can be made from harvesting these assets. And throughout the world, there has been regime creep, nationalisation. So in other words, there's been a tightening up. So what we're seeing is the private oil and gas industry getting rates of return of between 20 and 30% per annum. So if you divide that into 72, it'll tell you how many years it takes to double your money. So you double your money quite quickly. But when we plug the same, data into the Irish model that's there, when these fines come on shore, the rate of return is 46% per annum. So you double your money every 1.56 years. And that's what it's about. It's about the numbers game. And you might say, well, what can we do about it? Well, the template is already there. Let me just tell you a story. In the 1960s, there was quite a poor fishing country in Europe called Norway. And the Norwegians were offered at one stage, I think, about $170 a month for the rights to drill in the entire Norwegian offshore area by one of the private oil industries. And they were being told, by the way, there's no oil there. Like, the chances of finding oil are really remote. And we fast forward to today, we see Tony O'Reilly Jr. At international conventions telling people that you can make profit if in Irish waters with oil at just $40 a barrel. It's between 80 and 90 dollars a barrel at the moment. So it hasn't changed. But what changed in Norway Norway would have been a basket case if it hadn't been for an intervention in 1972. And what happened in 1972 was that a couple of very strong-minded people came in under a Labour government and they implemented change. And they did something that we haven't done in this country. They outlined a set of principles. And they'll say from now on, we will adopt these principles. One of the principles was there must be a slow rate of oil extraction. Another principle was it must make a qualitative difference to Norwegian society, for everybody. We must set up our own national oil company, an operating company. We must own the grid and the pipes and so on, so we actually can control the rents. In other words, we must really deeply intervene in this area. And they called in the oil industry, and private oil industry, were absolutely horrified. And it was a stand-up row, because at the time the rate of extraction by the state would have been about 50%. They moved it to 80%. Worldwide it's about 80% these days, except of course for here. We have the second most generous tax regime in the world. The most generous, I think, is Cameroon, which is 138 on the World Index of Corruption. And the pivotal point for this was meetings undertaken by Minister Ray Burke in 1987 when he became Minister for Energy. And he went to meetings unaccompanied with the oil industry, and the rest is history. We don't have any principles. So in our new in the plan that we're putting together, we have senior councils involved in areas covering planning, constitutional issues. We have seen really strong people on environmental issues, on blue sky thinking, on the strategic issue, the relationship between Ireland and Europe and Ireland and the rest of the world, if we can develop independence, which was another principle the Norwegians brought in 1972. We must become oil independent, energy independent as a country. And then everything flowed from those principles, those rules. We don't have rules. An earlier speaker was talking about the Department of Energy, PAD, the unit that's covering this area. It's entirely captive to industry. There's a thing called regulatory capture after taking place there years ago. You can, when one of the appendix to our book is going to contain press statements from Minister Pat Rabbitt and press statements from senior private oil industry people, and the question will be spot the difference. Because there isn't a difference. We're told that the national strategy is let them have an oil find. No oil is being found yet, and then we'll change things then. Then it's too late. We're told already that we can't go back and unpick the existing license regime. And therefore the whole challenge will be about trying to get better terms for future licenses. It's quite clear what needs to be done, which is to set up a national oil company, which is an operating company, to use it as a baseball bat, just as Norwegians did in 1972, to potentially joint venture with Statoil, which is a state-owned company in Norway, and to begin to build up our own deep knowledge of oil and gas and how it should be done over a period of 10 years as part of the license agreements we'll have with, across various fields. But today we have none of that, and we're starting from scratch with a public that really has very, very little knowledge on this area, and a political establishment that simply is completely outgunned on it. I went down through the list of every one of the members of the Oireachtas that were on that joint Oireachtas committee from all of the political parties, and there was 15 of them. There was 6 senators and 9 TDs. There was 3 people with Bachelor of Science qualifications and 1 non-practicing barrister, and the rest were made up of farmers, trade unionists and teachers, and none of them took up the invitation to go and visit the Norwegian industry and Norwegian government following that. There was no independent international experts brought in and consulted at all. The box was ticked, the committee fees were paid, and a year later, as of a few weeks ago, Pat Rabbitt responded by saying, well, we're now going to have a further chat about this. So nothing is happening. And nothing won't happen until the equivalent of nappies arriving in the government arrive. And that will happen only when the public is first awakened to all of the issues involved and then can see a way forward. And suddenly you will find politicians throughout the country will have the Pauline conversion that Dublin Bay Concern witnessed when you had 100 people screaming through the letterbox at politicians. They quickly convert to the new way of thinking. So I'm absolutely confident, in fact I'm certain, that with the correct effort and the experts that we're assembling, and once we awaken the Irish people to what's going on. It's just a question of time before the oil and gas regime in Ireland is going to change, because we are going to change it. Thank you.